what's up guys, and welcome to 61 Cabalist, the top ranged AoE DPS spec for clerics currently. This is one of those builds I definitely recommend you have in your arsenal because it really helps when it comes to clearing trash mobs in experts and raids. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the soul tree breakdown. You can see we got the full 61 points in Cabalist here. The reason that you do that is because, as usual, you do have quite a few abilities at the bottom of the tree that you need to make sure that you pick up. So let's go ahead and move on to the right here. We have 11 Inquisitor and 4 Defiler. There's a couple different ways you can do this. This one is my favorite so far. If you have an alternate build that you think does better that you'd like tested, please let me know. So with 11 Inquisitor, you pick up 10% spell power, you pick up 5% increased damage across the board, and you also pick up the extra point here in Agent of Affliction, which increases the damage of your delayed and damage over time abilities by 2%, which make up the bulk of Cabalist damage. So moving over here to Defiler, we take 4 on Open-Minded for the 8% wisdom increase, and if you come down here, you also see we pick up Rage Blight and Blighted Greed, which are it's a very special buff that gives you 5% increase in damage once you have all the stacks up, which is usually pretty quick. So now we talked about that, let's go ahead and move over to the masteries here real quick. Level 61, we take Avenging Shield. It's a 3% max health shield, not very strong, but it is good at increasing your effective health from time to time, every 6 seconds I believe. Moving up to 62, we take Divine Inspiration. This is specifically to increase your range from 30 meters to 35 meters. Moving up to 63, we take Faith's Freedom. This one is kind of malleable. You can move it wherever you like. I take Faith's Freedom for the Sanction Heretic applying Vex. You can also move over to the left and take Meditation, which will make your Ravaging Darkness refresh and spread stacks of darkness on the initial target to all enemies hit. I have tested this, however, and you do more DPS not using this in an AoE rotation, in my testing at least, so I do recommend that you do go with Faith's Freedom. However, like always, please feel free to play around with it and give me some feedback if you think it's better. Moving up to 64, we take Sinister Resolve. This increases the damage of your damage over time abilities by 8%, your delayed damage abilities by 5%, and your non-instant, non-channeled abilities by 3%. Moving up to 65, of course, I do recommend that you take the Soul Stream ability just because of its versatility. Soul Stream is a very powerful DPS cooldown, single target, or very powerful healing cooldown, so it can do both. So now that we've talked a little bit about the masteries, let's go into the macros. There's not very many for this build. Most of them are going to be on separate keys, most of the abilities that is. But we do use a K-Alert macro, which sets my K-Alerts up for me. We'll go over those here shortly. I have a single target macro here, which is just going to be one big spam macro. The single target in this spec isn't very good. It can usually get up into the high 30s, low 40s. So I would not play this spec if you're planning on doing a single target, but more on that later. And then of course the third macro is going to be just a reflect macro. It's a mouse over modifier so that I can hover my mouse over a target and hit the reflect key, my 9 key there, and I can cast reflect on somebody. So pretty good stuff there. Now that we talked about the macros, we'll go ahead and jump onto the bar. So down here in the bottom left here, you see I have the Armor of Devotion. This is from the Inquisitor tree. Increases your critical hit chance with damaging abilities by 5%. We have Sign of Asius or Asius, however you want to say it. This increases the damage of your Shadow Touch by 25% and causes it to apply Darkness. This is going to be more important for your single target stuff, but it also causes curses to deal additional damage based on spell power when they expire, or 300% of this damage if the curse is cleansed. So pretty good stuff there. Moving over to the right, we have our standard Defiler buffs here. Rage Blight, which is a self buff. You'll cast that on yourself. And then you'll have Blighted Greed, which you usually cast on a tank or a Defiler if you're using this spec in a raid. Over to the right, we have the K-Alert macro, which sets our K-Alert at 3, which is where my K-Alert is set up in my K-Alert system. Way far over to the right here, you see I have 3 different buttons here. These are going to be your toggleables. This is how you choose how many targets you're going to hit. So right now you can see I'm on Unbounded Obliteration and I have the K-Alert set up to tell me that it's 8 targets. But if I were to come over to the right for Condensed Obliteration, it'll change it to 5 targets. And of course the last one over here is going to be Focused Obliteration, which is going to be your single target toggleable. So it changes the damage that you do based on which toggleable you have. So for instance, if we come down here to Bound Fate, it does 16k damage. If you come and look at the Disintegration, it does 51k. For the single target, but as soon as I change it over to the 8 target one, Disintegration now does 27 to 8 enemies versus doing the 52 to the 1. Same thing with Bound Fate. Bound Fate does 8k to 8 enemies versus the 16k to 1. So make sure that whatever amount of targets you're going to hit, you're trying to get as close as you can with your self-buff toggleables here. So moving on down, we have a energy regeneration here. Esoteric Estimations, I believe that's how it's pronounced. Moving over to the right, we have Disintegration on a Q keybind. This is going to be a big part of your build because whenever you cast Tyranny of Death, this is how you trigger it manually without having to wait for the whole 10-second duration thing. So pretty big part here. Moving over to the right one more, we got Unleash Oblivion. This is another trigger ability that triggers your Tyranny of Death. Moving over to the right one more, we have the Ravaging Darkness. This one is it's an okay AoE damage buff, but the main purpose or main function here is that it will give you your mana back. So it gives 4% health and mana to the Cleric for each enemy hit. So if you hit 8 enemies, it can give you a nice little boost to 32% of your health and mana back. So pretty good stuff there. Moving over to the right one more, we got 5 different sigils here. All these sigils are part of your control suite, if you will. Right here, Sigil of Catastrophe will apply all of your sigils to 10 enemies. You're about to see what all the sigils are right now. So we go over to the right, we have Sigil of Ruin. This is a 2-second stun. This one's pretty good to use on trash packs and such in raids. If you go over to the right one more, we have Sigil of Spirits. This increases non-physical damage taken by 5%. This is similar to the support debuff, so only it hits 10 enemies. Moving over to the right, we have Sigil of Binding. This is a snare. One more, we have Sigil of Woe, which this is actually a purge for 10 enemies. Removes 1 buff. So moving over here one more, you can see we have Mass Reversal. This is an AoE Reflect. Pretty good stuff, particularly for PvP. One more, we have Howling Death. This grants immunity to the next Debilitate or Interrupt. Really long cooldown there, but it is, it has its uses in PvP. Down to the bottom left on the main bar here, we have Tyranny of Death. This is the main ability that does the bulk of your DPS for this build. Tyranny of Death. The whole point is you're trying to get Tyranny of Death up and spread it, and you want it to detonate. It can detonate 3 ways. It can detonate with one of your 2 Disintegration abilities here, Disintegrate or Unleash Oblivion. And then the third way is you can wait for it to tick down to 0 seconds and it will explode that way. Oh, it'll also explode if the enemy dies. So it'll explode on death, it'll explode when the timer runs out, and it will explode if you hit one of your Force Explode abilities. Moving over to the right one more here, we have Bound Fate. This is what you're going to use to spread Tyranny of Death. It's also going to be one of your main spammers. Moving over to the right, we have Well of Souls and your Curse of Anarchy. These right here are going to be the buffs that you need to put up beforehand to make sure that you're outputting the correct DPS. These both buff your DPS by quite a bit. So Well of Souls is, you want to try and cast that, but it's kind of tough to judge sometimes because if the mobs are moving around quite a bit, you want to wait till they kind of get stationary and the tank has in position and then pop that, because when you hit this, it puts a ring at their feet, and then if they move out of that ring, you no longer benefit from Well of Souls. Because in Cabalist, with 61 points in, when you hit a curse, it applies all of your curses, so you only have to have 1 on the bar here. Pick whatever one is your favorite. Moving over to the 5th key, we have Maelstrom, which pulls up to 10 enemies to the target's location. This one's actually pretty useful, particularly for tanks that don't have a lot of pulls, like Cleric and Rogue. You can help them out by using this to pull the enemies to their location or whatever is the closest mob's location and group them up for them. Moving over here one more, we have the last sigil, which is Sigil of Secrecy. This one is going to be the most used sigil. It is a Debilitate for 5 seconds. And next key over here is going to be another important one, Dominion. This one resets the cooldown on all your sigils and causes the next 3 sigils to have no cooldown. So if you use Sigil of Secrecy and then you use your Dominion here, you can chain up to 20 or 25 seconds of Debilitate, and then you can also cast your Sigil of Catastrophe, which will have a Sigil of Secrecy in it, for a total of 30 seconds of CC time there. So it's really good if you're clearing trash or whatever in a raid or an expert and they need to be CC'd. Moving over to the right one more, we have Soul Stream. Again, you can use this as a really powerful single target DPS cooldown or healing cooldown. Moving over to the right, we have the Reflect key. The 0 key, of course, is, if you've watched any of my videos before, you know that it's bound in my middle click key, but this is going to be your single target macro here. We have Dark Passage, which is a 15-meter teleport, and then we have Shadow Breach, which is a stealth for 10 seconds that also will heal you for 25% of your health, but the other cool part is it resets Dark Passage. So you can hit your Dark Passage and then hit Shadow Breach really quick and use another Dark Passage to get 30 meters away really rapidly. So that's it for the bars. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the K-alerts. So I track quite a few things here, I guess. The first of which we talked about earlier is going to be the 1, 5, and 8 here. I just do that to make sure that I have the correct one selected. If we move over to the left, we have Tyranny of Death. This is to make sure that I have a Tyranny of Death active on the target. One more to the left, we have our Sigil of Spirits. This is going to be your 5% increase to damage incoming for the enemy here. The last 30 seconds, so I track that. Moving on down, we have our 2 important curses there that are applied by this guy. There is actually one other curse that is applied. I don't track it though because it's a single target curse. and I know that if one of these is on it, then that curse is on the enemy as well. And then over to the left, of course, we have the Well of Souls. So really easy stuff there, nothing too complicated for that setup. So now that we looked at the K alerts, let's go ahead and get into the rotation. So let's go ahead and start this off here. We're going to go ahead and target our middle mob. You want to try and get the middlemost mob in the pack to make sure that everything hits okay. We have our K alerts already set up. We're on our 8 target toggleable here. So first thing we're going to do is hit our Sigil of Spirits, and then we're going to come in here and cast Well of Souls, followed by Curse of Anarchy. And then at that point we're going to cast Tyranny of Death, then Bound Fate, and then Disintegration. And then we're going to cast Tyranny of Death again, Bound Fate again, and then Unleash Oblivion. By this time we should be looking at refreshing our curses here shortly. So before we have to do that, if we do have some time in between, we'll start spamming our Bound Fate until that needs to happen. So let's go ahead and show you what it looks like. So first thing we're going to do, of course, is Sigil of the Spirits, followed by our Well of Souls, followed by our curses, followed by our Tyranny, followed by Bound Fate, followed by the Disintegrate, followed by Tyranny again, followed by Bound Fate again, Unleash Oblivion, and we're going to do Tyranny again, Bound Fate again, refresh our Well of Souls, refresh our dots, Bound Fate again, and we got our... See, it's pretty easy to maintain, very simple to deal with here. We're going to put on our Sigil of Spirits again here, do Bound Fate one more time, refresh Well of Souls, refresh our curses. Now I'm going to show you a trick here really quick on this one. We're going to refresh our Tyranny of Death without... Oh, we got to Disintegrate up. We're going to refresh the Tyranny of Death by using our Bound Fate on the 0 tick to save ourselves a global cooldown. So I'll show you how to do that. It can be difficult to master, but once you master it, it does pretty well. So we're at 0, hit Bound Fate. You see how it refreshed there? So you want to try and see if you can get that done while you're doing your DPS rotation. It can be difficult to master, but if you can do that, you can save yourself a couple global cooldowns per fight. Sometimes it'll do it automatically just from exploding while you're casting Bound Fate. Like, see, I just did it again, and then I just did a detonation. You can see over about a minute 15, we're still doing 230 or so. As you can see, the bulk of your DPS is going to come from your Tyranny, and also I'm not going to be able to show you what the peak DPS would be because ideally you'd have mobs dying too. A lot of different mobs dying that would also trigger your Tyrannies. So we're not really getting the DPS from that either, but you can see 230 or so, and I actually don't even have a AoE DPS crystal either. So, but that's it, guys. Over a minute 40 we were pulling like what, 220, 230 or so, and you'd see higher numbers than that if you were in an actual raid or an expert, because you're going to have creatures and enemies that have varying levels of hit points that are going to die as like staggered deaths, which you're going to get all kinds of crazy triggers and stuff from Tyranny. So let's go ahead and jump into this and show you what the single target looks like really quick. I'm going to run over here to the raid dummy really quick and we'll show what it looks like. So come to raid dummy, first thing to do is you're going to cast your, well, first you're going to use your Focus Obliteration to go to your single target, and then you're going to do Well of Souls, followed by your Curse, and then you're going to start spamming your single target macro. We should be pulling around 30 or so once this thing, 35 to 40 or so once it ramps up. So we're at our Shadow Touch here. Well of Souls just fell off, so we're going to go ahead and refresh those. So as you can see, we're in the 30s. It'll get a little higher here once we continue doing the rotation. One thing you want to kind of pay attention to here is that your dark water can fall off prematurely. So just make sure that you're spamming this thing, and as soon as dark water refreshes, you can start doing your single target rotation again, but you want to make sure that you are getting shadows. I think it's called Shadow Touch in there. That's the one that refreshes the dark water, like Shadow's Touch, yep, right there. So now that we refreshed it, we're going to go ahead and pop off that Soul Stream. We need to refresh our Well of Souls and the Curses again. See, we're at about 39 over a minute. You can keep going with this and it'll stay between high 30s, low 40s. Nothing spectacular here. However, if you do get into a pinch where you get stuck in combat and you need to do single target, you can maintain this pretty easily with just a couple of buttons, just to make do until you can swap to Inquisitor or whatever spec you're using. So, but that's it, guys. If you have any questions, please comment on the video, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.